Vitaly Klitschko, thanks for joining me on Upfront. 2 years ago, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets against what they believed to be a corrupt authoritarian government. The president, Viktor Yanukovych, fled to Russia. 2 years later, what do you believe has been the number one, the main achievement of that quote-unquote revolution in your country?
People understand right now they have influence, and from opinion, every citizens depend the direction which direction go the country. And right now the country changed, but expectation of people much bigger. Yes, of course, we expect much more changes, much more fight against corruption, much better dynamic to be part of European Union.
You mentioned corruption. 2 years on from Euromaidan, from those mass protests that were prompted partly by anger over corruption, today in Kiev, protesters keep coming back on the streets to protest against corruption again. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, says it may hold back a crucial bailout unless your government does something about corruption. Why have you and your fellow politicians in Ukraine been unable to tackle corruption?
People thought we change the faces, but not to change the system, and they expect much faster change. Yeah. And that's why the corruption still already we make huge step. I'm responsible for Kiev, and we investigate everything what happens before we find billions of stolen money and give everything to prosecutor office.
Some say that Ukraine is less of a democracy and more of an oligarchy. It's the big business tycoons, the oligarchs in the gas and energy industries who really run your country.
It's not true, but they have huge influence because they have tried to control the media, try to control resources of Ukraine, and also the oligarchs destroy the economy, equal opportunities for our economy because we doesn't have a middle class.
You're currently head of President Petro Poroshenko's political faction in Ukraine. Some say the president himself is an oligarch. Could you explain why, after the president publicly called for the prime minister last week to resign, some say a very bold move, around 30 of your own MPs failed to back a no-confidence motion in his government, and the prime minister, embarrassingly for the president, maybe for you too, survived? He's still the prime minister.
Answer is very clear. Some politician put his ambition over interest of the country. It's a big problem. And the whole country expect changes, fast changes. If you're not good enough, you have to go.
Do you still think the Prime Minister should stand down even after surviving this vote of no confidence?
Right now, the question right now for everybody, how develop whole situation and in Ukraine, but if politicians...
You'd still like to see him go?
Yes, I told it will be right decision.
The Russian Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, said last week that the West and Russia have, quote, slid into a time of a new Cold War. Ukraine, your country, isn't just in the middle of that Cold War. It's one of the main battlegrounds for that new Cold War. It's one of the causes, some might say, of that new Cold War.
It's right. We have a feeling it's the Cold War starting from Russia. First of all, I grown up in the Soviet Union. My father was Air Force officer, and I remember how works media and propaganda in Russia. It's the main weapons. Right now we understand the media is main weapons in Russians. They invest billions of dollars, and I know how effective that. Today I told we lose the game. The war against Russia, media war.
But do you believe we are? You believe we are in a Cold War, not just Ukrainians fighting separatists. It's a Cold War between the West and Russia again. You believe?
The Russians, everything what happens right now in Russia remind me as Soviet Union.
It reminds you of Soviet Union.
And the main goal, it's not secret. The main goal of Russia to rebuild the empire, to bring, and without Ukraine. Rebuild the empire almost impossible, and that's why instability comes from east of Ukraine, from Russia.
But isn't there a need then to come to an end, to come to some kind of compromise? You're never going to defeat Russia militarily. Isn't there a need for pragmatic purposes, for practical purposes, to save lives, to just bring this conflict to an end?
Pragmatic movement, what we have to do. We have to implement all part, Ukraine and Russia have to implement Minsk agreement.
Okay, that was the agreement last year that fell apart. You mentioned all the problems come from Russia and the destabilizing, and the Russian-backed separatist rebels have indeed been accused of human rights abuses, of violence. But so too have Ukrainian armed forces and volunteer battalions. Listen to what Amnesty International said last year. Both sides failed to take reasonable precautions to protect civilians. Both placed troops in residential areas. Ukrainian police were involved in torture. Pro-Kiev forces were involved in abductions. Is this the new Ukraine you're trying to build, where all these human rights violations are happening, even under Ukrainian armed forces, Ukrainian police? It's not just the Russian-backed separatists who are committing violations.
I'm sorry. Where's the reason of conflict? Can you give me an answer? Where's the reason for conflict?
That doesn't justify human rights abuses, though, does it?
No.
You can fight them without carrying out torture, abductions.
From the beginning.
This is what Amnesty is saying.
From the beginning. Right now, the right radicals come to the power. The people who headed Russians in Ukrainian government. I told the clear answer how we can head Russians. I am help Russians. My father is Ukrainian, my mother is Russian. In my body is Russian.
And there have been allegations that there are neo-Nazis fighting in volunteer units against Russians.
Nazis fighting, it's not true. It's everything is propaganda war.
US newspapers, not just Russian newspapers, have documented the Azov battalion and other such groups fighting on the front lines against Russia, who have swastikas on their trucks. It's not true at all?
I doesn't see swastika. I talk to the people. We defend our territory. We defend.
And what about the human rights violations? What do you say about amnesties?
We defend our country.
What about the torture, the abductions, the not protecting civilians, placing troops?
Please,
Amnesty's view, Human Rights Watch.
I don't know what from you take this information.
Amnesty International. You've heard of Amnesty International?
I'm sorry. I come from Ukraine.
Okay, but Amnesty International is a global NGO. Human Rights Watch.
Good example. I meet very high, just a couple of weeks ago in Davos. I meet very high position Russians, and they ask me, you know what is the people with the weapons, with machine guns, going to the street in the Kiev. I told him, I'm sorry, I come from Kiev. What from you take this information? They told me, you know what TV.
So you're saying the Ukrainian forces haven't committed any human rights violations?
The right answer. They create the story and believe in the story.
Okay, so you reject Human Rights Watch, you reject Amnesty International's reports about Ukrainian armed forces committing.
I don't have information. I live in Ukraine.
Okay, you're a big chess player. You've said, quote, chess is similar to
big players.
You're a fan of chess, I believe.
Yeah, okay, I'm fun player.
You've said chess is similar to boxing. You need to develop a strategy. You need to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of what your opponent is doing. Many would say it's Vladimir Putin who's been 2 or 3 steps ahead of the Ukrainian government, of Western nations, when it comes to the issue of Ukraine, Crimea. He's outwitted you all. Is that fair?
He's a good player. He's a good player, and this game is not easy because he used all strong side what have Russia and in this game. And but anyway.
But what do you think the West should be doing to stop him that they're not doing? What would you like to be seen?
United. It's very important.
Are they not? Is the West not united right now?
United position is very important against Russia. It's Russian instead to invest the money to economy, they invest so much money in secret service, in military, and Russians right now with sanctions have a huge problem.
But do you think the West is not united in its approach to Russia? You're saying you want to see united fronts. Does that mean it's not united?
I'm more than sure the West have to be united, and united position will be very strong argument against Russia.
And do you foresee a day? Do you foresee a day where there is actual military confrontation between the West and Russia?
I hope not. I hope not. We try to find a solution. It's a diplomatic solution, and but it's not a question about our independency and not a question about territory of Ukraine. In this way, it's no solution.
President Putin's PR people, you mentioned propaganda earlier in the interview, President Putin's PR people often put out pictures of him topless or working out in the gym or on horseback or engaged in judo. You've been a boxer, a fighter your whole life. Does he intimidate you?
It's his PR strategy. It's not mean. As I am former boxer, I have to be topless with boxing gloves, present myself. Sometimes it's looking very funny.
It looks funny. It's not something you're afraid of. It's more something you're laughing at.
No, it's, I'm not afraid. It's some funny pictures.
There are these constant allegations endorsed by the Interior Ministry under President Yanukovych, who you opposed, that you served as a debt collector for this mafia boss, Victor the Fish Rybalko. People make these claims that he was a backer of your boxing career until he was killed in 2005. Is there any truth to those allegations of your relationship with the Fish?
Please don't read the trash information. There's so much trash information around the world and so much speculation. If you come, it's no commentary for that. I don't see the reason to make a commentary for.
Okay. What's the difference? What's the number one difference between being a boxer, trying to be the heavyweight champion of the world, and being a politician in a country like Ukraine?
In boxing, you have clear rules. If you break the rules, you're disqualified. In politics, is a fight, no rules.
But there's supposed to be rules in politics. There's not in Ukraine at the moment?
You know what, young democracy is supposed to be the rules, but I have a feeling as boxer I come to MMA and worse than MMA because this fight is very, very tough.
Vitaly Klitschko, thanks for joining me on Upfront.